Okay, let's talk about the New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. And because you're watching this video, I assume you are preparing for this exam, and that is fantastic. You certainly need to know quite a bit of Algebra 1, obviously, to be successful on this exam. And what I have here for you is a nice little practice problem that you should be able to handle pretty easily if you are fully prepared for the New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. So I'm going to show you the solution to this problem in just 1 second. But before we get going, let me first quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TC Math Academy. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher. I have been teaching math for decades. Of course, I've been teaching algebra for decades as well. And I can tell you right now, you're going to need to remember a lot of the things that you learn in algebra 1. Again, this is a lot of things if you think about it. You study linear equations, how to graph lines, systems, quadratic equations, powers and exponents, rational. I can go on and on and on, right? So I'm not going to list all the things that are in your course, but all these things, okay, you need to be ready to, be prepared to answer these type of questions on your New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. Now, hopefully, you've been taking good notes and listening to your teacher, but if you need something above and beyond that, I have a fantastic test prep course for the New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. I'm going to leave links to it in the description of this video, but it's very, very powerful. I go over pretty much everything that you're going to need to be ready for the New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this problem here. So we have x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. So the first thing we want to do is consider what type of equation is this? Well, hopefully this little 2 right here is giving you a clue. This is a quadratic equation. Quadratic equation. Now that is likely a full complete chapter in your Algebra 1 math course. Okay, so when it comes to quadratic equations and kind of the technical definition of a quadratic equation is a second degree polynomial. So this right here is a polynomial and the degree of the polynomial is its highest power. So this is a second degree polynomial, therefore making it a quadratic function, quadratic equation. So when you see a quadratic equation, we have various techniques we can take to solve a quadratic equation. Okay, sometimes we can take the square root of both sides. Sometimes we can factor. Okay, sometimes we don't have any other choice but to use the quadratic formula. Okay, and of course, this is a whole discussion in and of itself. And there's something even called completing the square. So again, various things you can do, all depending on what the specific equation you're dealing with. Okay, but I can tell you right now, anytime you're dealing with anything in algebra, specifically in equation, you always want to look for opportunities to factor. Okay, which is a whole another big skill that you learned in algebra. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the solution here. Now, hopefully you did this problem. And by the way, I don't know if I asked you to put your answers into the comment section, but go ahead and put those into the comment section if you know what the solutions are. But let's go ahead and get into the actual problem right now. Okay, so what we want to do is factor this quadratic equation, right? So specifically, we can factor this because it's already equal to 0. So generally speaking, you want to get your quadratic equation set equal to 0, unless it's something like this. You have like x squared is equal to 16. Right here, we could just simply take the square root of both sides. We wouldn't want to go x squared minus 16 is equal to 0, although we could solve it in this manner. Here we could just go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So we want to get all of our terms, all of our quadratic equations set equal to 0. In this case, it's already set equal to 0. And that is kind of like your starting point, okay? Now, the second thing you need to do is to try to factor the quadratic equation, all right? Now, there's no guarantees that the quadratic equation can factor, right? Now, if this was not factorable, what would we need to do? Well, you would likely just go right into the quadratic formula, right? So we'd set our A, B, and C values. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about here, and you would plug it into the quadratic formula to get the solutions. But we don't have to do that in this case because this quadratic equation does factor, right? So we have x as the greatest common factor, get the GCF. Now, anytime you factor anything in algebra and you're not sure that you did it correct, all you can do is just put that, take your factor, in this case, the greatest common factor is x, and just multiply it back in and see if you get back to the original formula, right? So x times x will get me back to x squared, and then x times this 4 right here will get me back to 4x. So this looks good. Okay, so now we have basically one factor being multiplied by another factor. In other words, this is some number being multiplied by some other number. So let's just think of it like this. I have some number being multiplied by some other number. All I know is that the answer is 0. Okay, so something times something else and the answer is 0. How can you possibly get 0 as the answer, as the result of multiplication? Okay, the only way that can happen is if one or both of these right here are 0. Okay, and this is what we call the zero product property. All right, that's what we love to factor in algebra to solve these equations because we can use the zero product property. So what we're going to do is set these individual factors equal to 0 and solve, because this thing times this thing is equal to 0. So therefore, x must be equal to 0, or x and x minus 4 will be equal to 0. So we just need to set those individual factors equal to 0. So we'll set this x equal to 0. I mean, this is about the easiest equation you could possibly solve. So x is 0. Now you see I have 1 right here. Okay, this is our first solution. Let me kind of go back up here real quick. When you're dealing with a quadratic equation, you will always have two solutions. You got to always keep that in mind. It's super important. All right, so here is one of our solutions. X1 is 0. Now we're going to set this factor equal to 0. So x minus 4 is equal to 0. So let's solve for x. All we need to do is add 4 to both sides of the equation. And here is our second solution. X2 is 4. So here is our two solutions to our quadratic equation. Okay, so in terms of difficulty, I would say this is a pretty basic level problem. You're certainly going to see much more advanced algebra on the New York Regents Algebra 1 exam. So make sure you really study as much as you possibly can. Again, if you need additional complete full instruction, you definitely can't go wrong with my test prep course. Again, you can find the link to that in the description below. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best on this particular exam. Thank you for your time and have a great day.